Hello and welcome everyone. This is the very first episode of Misery I Love podcast. The podcast channel that helps you travel this misery world just by listening to us. We are your hosts for today. Pakaporn R,
Raksima C,
and Hsiung J.
This podcast is all about spooky stories around the world, starting off with a story from a country that is not far away from us. We are going to be talking about the most well-known suicide forest in Japan, Aokigahara Forest. Let's get started. Speaking generally, our perception toward Japan is that Japan is a developed country, a source of production for many high technologies, and a country that sets their care for customer safety as the first priority. However, it is hard to believe that a country like this isn't one of the highest suicide rates among high-income countries. In 2020, Japan reported that there are 16.7 suicides per 100,000 inhabitants, which is quite a high rate comparing with other countries, as well as how controversial it is with our prior perception. Another surprising fact is that 70% of suicide incidents in Japan are male, and is the leading cause of death in men aged between 20 to 44. For the leading motive of suicides, it was claimed that 49% of suicidal reasons were health issues. But because the category for health issues include both mental, which most of them is depression, and physical issues, it is not impossible to explicitly distinguish between these two. The second most commonly listed motive for suicide was financial issues or poverty-related issues, such as debt, causing up to 17% of suicides. And the third motive is household issues, such as disagreement in the family and domestic violence, which is responsible for 15% of suicides. And the fourth on the list is workplace issues, such as bad relationships in the workplace, causing stress, make up 10% of suicide cases. It is very depressing that a lot of people in Japan cannot stand the amount of stress that happen and decide to end their life by hanging themselves. And the most popular place where Japanese people choose to go for is the Aokigahara Forest.
Sprawling around the foot of Mount Fuji lies a well-known forest, Aokigahara. For many hikers and travelers, this forest seems like a serene and peaceful place to come visit. But the peace and the quietness itself also attracts other types of visitors too. Visitors that wish to come but not to leave. Aokigahara is located less than 100 miles away from Tokyo. There are many ways to get there, by trains, taxis, or your personal car. This number one suicide spot is also known as Jukai, or Sea of Trees, because of its high density of trees and branches. With barely any wildlife living there, it creates a peculiar deserted atmosphere of the forest, making it the perfect place for someone who decides to end their lives. Around 100 bodies were found here annually. The police has discontinued publishing the data after 2003. However, it is believed that the numbers of the corpses found hanging in the forest each year are still rising. Signs like "life is a precious gift," "quietly think once more about your parents, siblings, or children," and "please don't suffer alone, first reach out," with the authorities' phone number are placed in front of the entrance of the forest, trying to be the last reminder for those hopeless visitors.
So now I'll be talking about the mythical and scientific reason of suicide. So back in the day, suicide was known as a sumarai act, which is an honorable act. But in other cases, poor families would abandon their elders in the mountains because the elders could not adapt to society and their souls would be known as a yurei. A yurei is another name for souls that are filled with hatred, sadness, and desire for revenge, because they were left in the forest to die slowly due to abandonment and starvation. And according to the Japanese belief, if the person dies with hatred, anger, sadness, or desire for revenge, their soul would be trapped on earth, and their souls would just be wandering around and cursing those who cross their paths. As so many cases of suicide had occurred in the Aokigahara forest, one Buddhist monk named Hsiung J said that it was an invitation from beyond, from the spirits of people who have committed suicide, that were calling for people here to kill themselves. Apart from the mythical claim about the demon's forest, there are considerably more scientific explanation on why there are so many cases of suicide that happen in this sacred forest. The geological location of the forest is at the northwest of Mount Fuji, which means that there will be a large amount of magnetic iron in the volcanic soil that will interfere with the functions of hikers, compasses, or phones. And because it is covered with a sea of trees, sunlight can barely penetrate through this thick foliage, making it even harder to find a way out. Some of you might wonder what the Japanese government has done to prevent suicide. The Japanese government has actually implemented measures to prevent and lower the domestic suicidal cases ever since 2007. The prevention measures are similar to measures in the medical field, which includes 3 steps. The first step would be to increase activities that prevent suicide, and the second step would be the actual preventative measure for people that have attempted suicide, while the third step would be, in case of suicide, to take care of their loved ones. Practice for suicidal prevention is one of the most focused factors to lower suicide rate. It is found that people with depression are at higher risk of suicide, so the government has indicated policies that approach different ages to carry out mental health activities and practices to prevent depression and suicidal thoughts. In 2019, the Japanese government has lost about 2.7 trillion yen due to suicides and depression. Eager to minimize this number, the Japanese government has implemented several other prevention policies, and last year, the total suicide was 20,830, which is 251 lower than 2020, but 661 higher than 2019. Although the suicide rate of Japan has dropped out of the top 10, but suicide remains a major concern in Japan. Will more people continue to walk in the Aokigahara forest looking for death, or will the savior arrive in time to prevent their death?
Thank you for listening to the first episode of Mystery Unlocked podcast. For next week's episode, we're going to be talking about a story from Japan's neighboring country, South Korea. If you're interested in listening to more content like this, please join us next week in our premiere live session. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to our channel. See you again next time.